Hi,
And
Phil.
all right, we're currently on the air. Hi, Connie. How are you?
Great. How are you?
Good. So this is the first episode of State of Play, where I try to bring my friends on who are filmmakers who have regular jobs but have these side projects as well. And today we're going to talk about Connie's side project. That's a short film called Jeffrey. Can you tell us about the project, Connie?
Yeah. So Jeffrey is about a character who's an eternal being, and basically it takes place in the world that's between death and what's next. And Jeffrey's world on the exterior looks like a creepy old motel where the patrons are checking out. And so basically the story follows Jeffrey's life, of the one day in his life. So basically Jeffrey manages this world, and he's the caretaker for the world where broken and dismembered people have to pass through on their way to whatever is next. And Jeffrey's character is, he's been doing this job day in and day out for eternity, and he basically has to reassemble the people who are passing through. So he's like sewing them back together, and literally he's physically putting people back together. And it's the idea that as we go through life and hardships, we have, we become broken, and he allows people to become whole and complete again so they can move on. And he's physically doing that, but it's a metaphor for being able to have some completion in life and forgiveness and second chances. And then the story is kind of a love story where this one night something magical happens, and he has an encounter with one of the women that's passing through, and they share a moment, and it's a moment of human connection, which he's never had before. And so it's this short moment where he meets this woman before she moves on. So it's kind of a dark fairy tale in a way, because the environment is set in kind of a creepy, dark way. And he's, the opening images is him sewing these bodies together. So you don't exactly know what he's doing. But as the story reveals itself, you realize that he's the one that's putting people back together so they can move on. And so it's kind of a sweet story, but a kind of a dark twist to it.
Right, because when I read it, it reads a little bit like a horror film. I think the setting's creepy motel, which is always shortcut for bad things are going to happen in this story, right? It's like, it's like desert plus creepy motel. Oh, people are going to die. Cool. So it has that vibe.
Kind of. Pardon?
I said it has that vibe initially, but it slowly, as the script develops, it does take on this fairy tale aspect of renewal and rebirth. And so you would describe it more as a fairy tale rather than a horror piece.
Yeah, it's definitely not a horror piece. I think it's set up like a horror piece because the opening scene, you're in this deserted highway. Mm-hmm. Some characters see this creepy motel, so it sets it up kind of like, it's kind of a little bit of Hotel California and a little bit Bates Motel. And then once you enter, in the first, Jeffrey seems a little bit like this creepy guy. Then the second, you see him sewing these body parts together. So you kind of think like, is he a serial killer or what's going on? But as it reveals, you realize that he's actually helping these people and putting them back together so they can move on. So and I don't see it as like a horror film as far as like it's not gory and bloody. The characters and the way that the dead people are handled, it's more that it's a creepy, eerie setting versus a slasher horror setting. So it is kind of set up that you kind of think maybe he's a serial killer, but at the end you realize that that's not the situation.
Now, I don't know how much you want to give away of the story itself, because it does feel like the way that it does end feels a little bit more on the horror side, because it feels a little bit like the people that we meet at the beginning of the script are going to meet their fate So is Jeffrey taking bits and pieces from other people to give renewal to people that had come prior? The people who had arrived before the story had started. Does that make sense?
I think so. But yeah, he's not. I mean, it's kind of like he's
not killing them, right? He's not killing people.
He's not, because he's in the afterlife. So these people
so
have
everything
already...
we're seeing is in the afterlife. We're seeing some representation of the afterlife.
Well, it's another dimension. So basically, the exterior of the exterior of the motel is in the real world. And so when the people drive up to it in the beginning of the script and they see it, it's kind of like a harbinger of what's going to happen to them. So basically, they are the characters that end up at the end. So basically, it's like kind of a circle of life. So so
are these people reaching the metaphorical end of their life, if you will, and all that's happening is this is sort of their fate to show up at this place, and that
exactly.
And what they don't know is that this is just the doorway to the entry to the next phase of their life.
Yeah, so the exterior of the motel is in the real world, and they run into it because you know that their impending doom is coming. And then when you're inside of the motel, you're in another dimension. So that's kind of after people have died. So it's kind of the away station, or the midpoint between when someone's died in a tragic death or they've been dismembered in some way. They end up in Jeffrey's world, and he kind of puts them back together so that they can move on to whatever is next. So whatever is next is open-ended. So whether you believe in an afterlife or reincarnation or heaven and hell, like that's kind of open for the viewer's interpretation of what they think is after death. But he's like the mid stop. So people have to, these dead souls go through Jeffrey's world so they can move on, and his world is the world of people who have been in tragic accidents or somehow dismembered and disfigured, and he's physically putting them back together.
Right.
And so so the Jeffrey's world is another dimension. So it doesn't exist with the reality and the physical constraints that exist in our real world. His world is another dimension. So it's kind of like the TARDIS in Doctor Who, like the police box exists in the real world as that, but once you're inside of it, it's its own world. And Jeffrey's world is his own world, and it exists in another dimension.
Now,
once you're inside Jeffrey's world, then you're moving on. So those people that are there have already died in the real world, or have they passed on?
Now, before I continue on with just a lot of these nuts and bolts of the story, I want to talk about the success you've already had with the project, because you have already won a screenplay competition, correct?
That's correct. So it's with the Emergence program, and
who's that with? Who's the Emergence program? Who's it run by?
Well, the Emergence program is it's a number of vendors that have come together to support new filmmakers and underrepresented groups in the film industry. So there's a number of vendors, from the camera division to Leonard Chapman to Hot Tricks Inc., that they've to support new filmmakers. So they held a competition last year, and they were looking for female writer directors, and I submitted my script, and they chose 3 projects to support last year. And so now we're putting the project together, and we'll shoot it.
And what did you win with the screenplay competition?
With the screenplay competition, the camera division provides all the camera and lens equipment. And then there's lighting equipment from Lightgear and Grip and Electric, as well as there's some post facilities as well as production facilities. So it's mostly, or it's almost all of the gear and equipment and facilities. So on my side, yeah, it's amazing. And then on my side, it's raising the funds to pay for the crew, pay for the creation of the sets and other things like that. So the on-set things that I need to raise the money for. But as far as the gear and equipment, it's really an amazing package, and they're really flexible, and they also provide a lot of support and introductions to PR firms and
Oh, wow.
DPs and things like that. Yeah, so it's been amazing.
And what is your timetable for production?
Well, we're putting a Kickstarter campaign together, and that we'll raise the money for the production side, for the crew and building out the set design. And we're going to launch our Kickstarter campaign in February, and that'll run for a month. And then once we have those funds in place, then we'll plan on shooting. So the shoot dates will probably be towards the end of March, beginning of April.
So shooting is March and April.
Yeah, and it'll be a 3 to 4 day shoot.
Yeah, the one thing I liked about the script specifically was how visual it was.
Right.
I think that even myself as a writer, I've become very accustomed to writing dialogue to try to explain what's happening. And it can become a crutch, but I noticed that with your script, there's almost no dialogue. There's maybe, I don't know what, 5 lines of dialogue. It's very, very sparse, which is good for filmmakers, because that's, I think, the point of making films is images, really. But
Yeah.
so that's going to be really challenging. How do you, in a 3 and 4 day shoot with that many images to capture, is there any strategy you've been thinking about to try to make things more efficient, or to try to get what you want in the least amount of time? Because you can't explain it, right? You can't say, oh, this golden scarab means X, Y, Z. You've got to show it. And so how do you plan on achieving the number of shots you need to acquire in order to make the narrative work?
Well, we're doing a lot of pre-planning in the pre-production stages. So, so far I've put together all the storyboards, and then I'm working with a pre-visualization team to previs everything before we shoot it. So my production designer and my DP and the previs supervisor, we're all working together to work out what the sets are going to look like, what camera angles we're going to shoot at, how we want the cameras to move. So a lot of that is going to be worked out before we get on set. So it's been pretty great because, you know, I have a really great production designer on board, and he's been doing a lot of drawings. We've looked at a lot of set locations. So right now we have a couple of options, whether we're going to use a pre-existing set or we are going to build out, depending on how much financing we raise. So once we have that locked in, then we'll build the set in the virtual 3D world, and we'll be able to put in cameras, and we'll be able to like set the camera moves and the timing and all of that before we start shooting. So pretty much we'll have a short script.
So when you say 3D world, what do you mean?
Well, we'll build it in a 3D modeling program. So something like Maya or 3D Studio. And then, so we'll have the model and the world built in 3D in the computer. And in that world, we can set the cameras and with the specific lenses, and we can create a path for the camera so we know, you know, where the camera is going to be placed and how it's going
I see. So this is just a very advanced pre-visualization that you're building.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll do an actual animated pre-visualization of the film before we shoot it. So pretty much we'll be able to see what the film is going to look like. And I was concerned because one of the things about this script is that there really isn't any dialogue. There's literally 2 lines in the beginning of the film to kind of set up the story, and then the rest of it is all with actions. So when I was talking to DPs, it was really important for me to find someone who shared my vision and understood what I was trying to do and had a vision for bringing to life like what I saw in my head. And so, you know, we did a lot of talking beforehand about how the shots could look, what kind of lenses we might use, how the camera might move. And, you know, those conversations kind of just help us kind of figure out how to tell this story in a visual way. So it's not just static, because we don't have anybody talking to explain what's going on. It's all in the, and the other piece that's really important is casting of Jeffrey, which we're in the process of doing, and really finding someone who just can embody the character and who's just like has this animated facial and physical kind of acting ability. And because we are going to follow this character, and he's not going to talk, he doesn't talk, and basically all the story is through his actions and how he pantomimes things and his gestures and his facial expressions.
You know who?
So that's the other key thing.
I wanted to say the actor that I imagined in my mind who would play Jeffrey is this guy Doug Jones. You know him?
Oh yeah, of course. I just saw The
Amazing.
Shape of Water, and I loved it. And actually, Guillermo del Toro's The Devil's Backbone was kind of an influence for this project, which is kind of a horror film, but really stylized. And also my film is very stylized. And so when The Shape of Water came out, I was like, oh my God, I have to see that. And I just thought it was incredibly beautiful.
Really?
And the main character is mute, which is very similar to the main character in my story. And also it's a love story about these two people or characters from different worlds that really shouldn't be together, or who can't be together. And that's a very, in my film, it's the same. It's a love story about two people that are not going to be able to be together. So yeah, so the casting is key, and then just being able to film it and capture those movements and the gestures and the acting, that's the other key part of it.
Now, what is your? Oh no! Now I can hear myself. Weird. What is the inspiration for the wanting to explore birth and renewal?
Well, this is a theme that runs through most of my work. So I really was influenced by existential stories like No Exit by Jean-Paul Sartre. I shot that play a year ago in someone's living room.
I remember.
Yeah. And then I've written a number of stories about characters that exist in this middle world. So now I have like a whole world of these eternal characters. And that exist in this middle world. So, yeah, I don't know how that came about. You know, I started writing these stories, and those were the stories that were interesting to me, and the kind of characters that were interesting, and really kind of exploring like what happens after death. And it seems that when I looked back at all of the work that I'd written, a lot of them deal with that. Some supernatural aspect, some magical aspect, and all of the stories kind of have this idea of hope and overcoming obstacles in life and having a second chance.
Well, I guess death is the greatest obstacle, right?
Yeah. And then also just the idea of looking back at one's life and realizing that it wasn't in vain, and that that no matter what we did, there's something positive about it, and that we've had some positive effect on the world. And I think that at the end of life, that's when people reflect on that and they look back on that. And so that is something that has been very interesting and important for me to look at and to bring to light.
And what, I'm trying to think what else. Or what are some of the other things that you want to explore in your story?
Well, the things that are key to me is really a message of hope, and also the idea that there's magic in the world, whether we believe in or we see it, but there's like such magical things that happen, whether it's having a family or like growing a garden or whatever it is. And we just need to take a moment to really appreciate all the things that are in our life.
And why is, I mean, I get why appreciating what you have is important. Why is the notion of hope via an afterlife an important aspect for you for the story?
What? Say it again?
Well, why is the idea of hope in the form of afterlife, like, why is that something that you consider really important? Because you said that hope's important and that magic is important. Why magic in this particular way? Because like you said, there's magic, like you said, like having a family, but then you said there's magic, but your film specifically is about the magic of rebirth out of death. Now, do you believe in an afterlife, or is this more of a metaphor for like renewal in life? Like, what is the best way I can say it is like, if one door closes, another one opens, right? That's kind of hopeful, magical in a way.
Yeah.
But it's different than saying,
Yeah.
I'm going to die today, and then tomorrow I'm going to wake up as a flower-stuffed doll. So in what ways is this metaphor important
really,
for hope and for magic?
yeah, it's really about not letting life or things that happen in life tear you down, I guess. Or I think sometimes life throws things at us and we're not expecting it, or there's hardships or things happen, and um like you can't give up, you know? So I mean, I guess maybe one of the things that kind of influences me a lot is just that when my mother passed away,
Uh-huh.
and it was just really a hard time in my life. So
Yeah, no, I know. When my father died, it was very difficult.
yeah. So, and you want to think that your life has meaning.
Sure.
So I
Yeah,
think
meaning's
that,
very important.
yeah. So I think that all these stories explore someone's life and the idea that they mattered, you know. And so I think that's kind of something that I always bring to my stories is it's someone who's reviewing their life and seeing that the things that they did and the choices that they made, that it mattered and that they weren't wrong.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I liked in the story that you used flowers as a, I think it was like almost like potpourri, like flowers in as a metaphor for renewal, when Jeffrey would stuff the dead bodies with flowers. Is that did I read that right?
Yeah, he stuffs them
Yeah,
with dried flowers and crystals and beautiful things.
yeah, it's very beautiful. It's a very beautiful image. It's very luscious, and is, I mean, I imagine when, just because your mother came up, are those things that you and your mother really loved, or is that something that she really loved that you are using that as a metaphor for her, or is that just something that you really like and that you find that a
Well,
connection to that through those things?
yeah, it's kind of a lot of things. I mean, you know, flowers, they die and come back, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
rose bush at the end of summer, you cut them down to there's nothing, and then they come back in the spring. And lilies are the same way. And it is one of the things that my mother loved. Like she had a garden, and I remember roses and orchids and lilies and violets. You know, that those were the things that she grew in her garden. And you know, most of those flowers, you know, they die off and then they come back and they're reborn again. And so that's part of the story. And when I was a child, like that was some of the things that we did as a family, like in the garden, and they were really important to my mother. And so we would replant these flowers and trim them back every season. And then also, it represents my family. My father's sisters are named Lily and Violet. And then my name, it means orchid.
This is the Chinese name that you have?
Yes, my Chinese name is, which is Wei Lan, means orchids.
Okay.
So
that's very beautiful. So she named you all after flowers. That is one hell of a metaphor then.
Yeah. So it's all my aunts that have flower names, and then my name is also Orchid. So that's kind of the naming of the characters, and the idea of flowers and rebirth, and that's part of it. And then just the idea that there's this beauty in these flowers, and even the dried flowers that he's stuffing them with, there's still a beauty in them.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I did the short film how that would work, because my name means warlike or lover of horses. So there would be a lot of horses and a lot of war, but not a lot of flowers. But I think that's really beautiful that you chose to use that metaphor to connect you and your mother together through cinema. I think that's really personal and very cool.
Yeah, thanks.
Sure. And then what else? I mean, do you feel like that's, I guess we'll break the format here just a little bit. Do you feel like that's enough? Do you want to talk? Is there anything else you want to talk about? As far as this project, because we can talk about other stuff. I've got a list of stuff we can talk about.
Well, let's see. What else about the project?
Let's do this. Why don't you tell me who's involved by name, like who's your DP at this point, because we know things change, but at this point, who's the DP, who's the production designer, who's on board, and let's be a little more specific with those kinds of things. Just who are your key players at the moment?
Well, let's see. Recently, Jeff Hammer joined as producer, which was amazing because I was pretty much doing all the creative and all the producing, and he came on board and took over all the producing aspects of it so I could really focus on the creative. And then Michael Nye is my DP. He did a beautiful project called Dust, which you can see on YouTube or Vimeo. And then Adam Davis is my production designer, who's amazing. And then I have Marianne Yee, who's on board to do the makeup.
Uh-huh.
And now we're looking for actors. So that's the next stage now, is like really locking in the actors. And so that's kind of been, we put together a number of lists, and now it's really just trying to work out how to get to those people and how to attach an actor. And yeah, and it's been kind of an interesting process, just interviewing DPs, just because I felt that this was like the key position to really tell this story. I think since there isn't dialogue, that it's really about the imagery and how we shoot it, the angles, the camera movements, the lens choices, things like that. And so I looked at so many DP reels, and it was really a difficult choice, just because there were so many great DPs and their work looked amazing. And to narrow it down to one person just was a challenge. But I felt that Michael and I had a good dialogue and way of communicating, and so I moved forward with him. So it's been great. He's been amazing. And Adam is the same. I spoke to a number of production designers, but Adam put together some photos, and so he's like, okay, I'm going to put together, like a kind of his own lookbook of what he thought the film would look like. And then we compared it. Before he looked at my lookbook, we shared each other's photos, and a lot of the imagery that he picked out was similar to the imagery that I had also picked out. So
that's great.
Yeah. So I felt really comfortable that Adam really kind of understood what I was looking for, and he had his own ideas about it, but it fit with what I thought.
Yeah, I feel like finding collaborators is a little like dating.
Yeah.
it's really hard to find someone that you're compatible with as far as like keeping a vision very straight and not letting the project go off the rails. Because if you make any miscalculation, not any, but if you make a big miscalculation with somebody, it could really derail the project. And
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
like any kind of relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just with the key people, like you really want to be able to talk to them. You really want to feel like they understand you, that they have a clear vision of what you want, but that they also are bringing their vision to it as well.
Right, and you have
And
to be able to speak very freely with the people you're collaborating with. If you feel like, oh, I don't know if I could talk to them about this thing, even though it's important to the story because of sensitivities, or maybe they just don't understand what it means. Like the flowers, like maybe he's like, I'm not a botanist, or flowers suck, right? That would be a problem. And so
yeah,
it's good that you're being very selective with who you're bringing on the project. And I think that the more personal, probably, I guess, there's probably some kind of weird inverse curve. Like the more the money and the more personal, like at either side of the curve means you have to be very selective with who you choose. Because if it's not very
yeah,
personal, it doesn't really matter who you pick. And if it's super low budget,
yeah,
and then it's just an experiment, not a big deal. But if as soon as it becomes personal or a lot of money get involved, it becomes hypercritical, I think, to bring in somebody that you really trust, like a really good friend. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so hard to find someone to work with, is because you're kind of picking friends in a way. And it's also one of the reasons why the film industry is so messy, if you will.
yeah. I mean, in this whole process, I really understood like why people always work with the same people.
Mm-hmm.
You know how to talk to one another. You understand each other's sensibilities and vision. You know what to expect. And so I totally understand that, having gone
Mm-hmm.
through this process.
Yeah, no,
And you wanna,
I
yeah, and
felt
you
that making
really
Milkshake.
wanna, huh?
I felt that making Milkshake. I felt like when I cast Danny and Ned, I couldn't have made a better choice, really. Like they were, despite the challenges each one brought to the project, I would work with them each again in a second, because like I understand that we have a good rapport, and like we just kind of get on the same page with things, and it's really great. And the same with the DP that I always use, Bennett Cerf. We tend to have like a very similar, our ideas are pretty simpatico at times, and it's like when those times when they meet up, you're like, I really want to work with Bennett again, or I really want to work with this other person again, just so we can get together and share ideas and collaborate. It's nice finding those people.
Yeah, yeah, it is really great, especially when when you know, or you trust them, and you know that they have an understanding, and you can talk to them and say, no, this is what I have in mind, and they go, oh yeah, I get it, and you feel like, all right, this is gonna work.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's. I think we should try to wrap this up. It's been a little bit of time, and we both have things to do, I think, today. I've got to actually edit the clown video as soon as we get off this that I keep talking about. But I did want to ask you just a couple fun questions. See any good movies lately?
Well, let's see. The last couple of things that I saw The Darkest Hour,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was brilliant. Gary Oldman was amazing. You could barely recognize him, and but I thought that film was great. And then the thing that I saw prior to that was The Shape of Water, which I really loved. I just thought it was so beautiful, the colors in it. And I was really watching for like the camera movements and the acting, because it's similar to my film. And I just thought that it was really beautiful.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
Oh no, and just the way, even though the two main characters, they never talk, right? They don't really communicate other than in sign language. And so you really felt that they were falling in love. And by the time, they fall in love, you're like, oh yeah, I totally see this. Even though he was this creature from the sea and she was this human, you wanted them to be together, and you could see how they fell in love. And so that's something that I hope that I can achieve in my film as well. It's just that you see these two characters coming together, and you want them to be together, and you can see how they fall in love.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, 2017, the film that I really liked was The Disaster Artist. I thought,
Oh, right.
dude, have you seen it?
I have. Yeah, I love
I
that too. I thought it was great.
I thought it was amazing that they were able to take the audiobook. I listened to the book, the audiobook, and so I thought the adaptation was really well executed. I was surprised that they were able to make Tommy Wiseau and uh, sorry, what is the other gentleman's name? It's Tommy Wiseau
Great.
and who?
Uh, Greg.
Greg Sestero, right?
Yeah.
You could look at that story and just make fun of them because The Disaster Artist really does sum up the nature of the film. It production and writing, and it's like they stumbled through the whole thing, failure after failure, but through their perseverance and their relationship, the bond that they formed initially by believing in the same thing, kept it alive. And now you see this incredible, like almost Cinderella story from this very strange scenario. And the writers could have made fun of Tommy and Greg and just been like, haha, look at these idiots. But I liked how, because I don't think they're idiots, by the way. I just think that you could have taken that perspective. And I liked how they really humanized Tommy and Greg and let us feel their victories as well as their defeats in a very human manner. It just felt like a really excellent story. And I was laughing like 90% of the time. It's one of the funniest movies I've seen in a long time. It was really good. So I recommend that movie. I have not seen Shape of Water yet, but I will see it probably when it comes out on video. Del Toro's not my kind of filmmaker, but his images are so beautiful. It's impossible to deny that.
Yeah, the imagery is so beautiful. I mean, on the big screen, just the way they handle the lighting and the color,
it's very
incredibly
theatrical.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I like it a lot. And
yeah,
then,
that's.
Sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
Well, give me a bad movie. What is a movie you hated this year?
Oh God, what was the worst
Well, last year
thing
in
I
2017. 2017. What is the movie you absolutely hated?
Well, I hate to say, but I think the Justice League pretty much takes that spot.
Really?
I mean, Wonder Woman was so amazing, and I'm a huge like comic book action fan, and so growing up, reading the Justice League, watching the Justice League animated film TV series, like it's such a great story, but I think that the film didn't quite handle it that well. And I did read a lot of articles about it, and I know that Zack Snyder had a lot of things going on this year, and my heart goes out to him.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the film I think didn't quite come together at the end.
That sounds fair. After I saw Batman, I was like, I think I'm done with the superhero movie. I mean, I've forsworn all superhero movies at this point. I'm just kind of tired of them. But I think for me, the movie that I disliked the most, I'm trying to think. I just had it on the tip of my tongue a second ago. Oh, damn it. I can tell you that the series that I really have disliked is The Crown. I've been watching that with
my
girlfriend. Yeah, there's this really weird thing about it. I mean, family drama is not that exciting. And just because it's The Crown doesn't make it more exciting. And the score is just completely out of place. It's just such a bizarre, like the tone is so weird. I don't understand I don't know why. I just don't know. I don't understand how I'm supposed to feel with the music. And so I find it to be very confusing.
Yeah, I haven't watched it, and I'm a big fan of Matt Smith. I mean, I would love to work with Matt Smith, and I would love to have him play Jeffrey. Like, Jeffrey to me is modeled after Matt Smith. But I have not watched that series.
It's very beautiful. You probably like it just because it's luscious. It's just gorgeous and very theatrical. It's very professional. It's exquisitely produced. Technically, it's a marvelous thing to watch. I just don't understand it, I think, as a
Well, what else are you watching that you like?
I think the obvious things are Stranger Things I really liked.
I love that.
It's awesome.
Amazing.
The hits, the unexpected hit of the year, as far as I'm concerned, is Bright with Will Smith and Joel Edgerton.
I've heard so much about it. I haven't seen it yet.
It's great. And if you like fantasy, which you do, I
I
think you'll
do. I
like
love
it.
it.
It's such a bizarre world. It's like if Lord of the Rings happened and we're the living history of that fake history. So that it's all told from the LAPD dealing with orcs and elves and magic wands that can destroy the world. So I thought that was really cool. And Will Smith did his thing. He did it great. Joel Edgerton is amazing. I can't get it.
Oh,
He's just
okay.
incredible.
Oh, I have to watch that because I'm also doing writing a script that's a series that's about if something fictional happened and it is today. So we're doing an adaptation of Dorian Gray, but with the
Mm,
idea that Dorian Gray, instead of dying at the end of the original book, actually lived, and now 100 years later is still living in today's world, but is
cool. I
basically
like that.
immortal. Yeah.
All right. So do me a favor, just to wrap things up. Make sure to send
Okay.
me all the links that you want to put in the description. So anything from if you have the website, to production designer or DP, if they have a website. If you
Absolutely.
have a personal
Okay.
website, send it to me. And anybody who's interested, I'm going to put the description of the links below. And check out Connie's film, Jeffrey, which will be coming out sometime probably end of summer is my guess.
Yeah, end of summer. So hopefully, if all goes well, we'll shoot in end of March, April timeframe, and then we'll have it edited and with music completed by the end of summer,
And
fall.
so for distribution, just so that everyone can know where to find it, are you going to go to festivals or are you going to go YouTube, Vimeo, online streaming platform kind of
Well,
thing?
we'll start with festivals. We'll start with festivals, and then from there, work out where we're gonna post it.
Okay, so
But I'll
somewhere.
let you know so you can let
Okay,
everybody know.
well, we'll have to do another stream as the project comes together and as we get closer, maybe even afterwards, so
Oh,
that because what I want to do is have like
yeah.
I would love to bring people back so that we get an initial feeling for the project and who you are, and then maybe sometime in the middle and then at the end, so that we kind of get an evolution. And what we might do, or what I might do later, is maybe we'll get a couple other filmmakers. Maybe we'll get you and Jason and Michael on board, and we'll just talk about our films. And just so that because
Okay.
I like this idea, I like getting all my friends on board and talking about this. So this is great. So at the end of summer 2018, it's going to be done. Go to festivals, and sometime maybe middle of the year 2018, we'll see something online.
Yeah, yeah, and then I can keep you posted. So
Okay.
as we go into production, I can let you know what's going on because I'm sure after we shoot it, I'll have a lot to talk about.
Okay. Yeah, I love that.
As far as,
So yeah, so keep me up
yeah,
to date,
yeah,
and we'll talk really soon, obviously, and
yeah, and then yeah,
we'll
we
do.
can do something because we're gonna start shooting all these interviews that we're gonna use for the Kickstarter campaign, and so I can also just let you know how that goes, just because I know it's kind of a challenging thing, and a lot of people, have questions about doing a Kickstarter campaign. So I'm just learning, and so like as I learn stuff, I can share it with you.
Great. Well, we'll talk soon. We'll do a whiskey tasting soon,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
have a great weekend or the rest of the weekend, and yeah, just keep me in touch. Keep me up to date with everything.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Phil. I
Thanks,
appreciate it.
Connie.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye.